What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of the HBO Max original series, The Franchise Season 1. This will follow Episode 1, which is called Tecto Meets the Eye, and is directed by Sam Mendes. Alright guys, so here we are with the very first episode of the franchise, now premiering on Max and HBO. This is a series I was really looking forward to because Armando Iannucci has created some of the most beloved series and movies in the last decade or so. He created, of course, Veep, which is very similar to this show, to be fairly honest, but also he worked on stuff like and created In the Loop. He, of course, Alan Partridge. He, of course, did, Death of Stalin, all great material for a lot of people, that love that kind of stuff. Like, like in the park baseball, knowledge-based stuff, especially Veep, which goes really deep into the inner workings of like presidencies and stuff like that. So here we have a new comedy, which brings in a lot of people. It brings in Himesh Patel, Aya Cash, Jessica Hynes, Billy Magnussen, Richard E. Grant, Daniel Brühl, Isaac Cole Powell, Lolly Adefope, and yeah, it's a series that is basically the inner workings of a big budget superhero film from a place called Maxwell Studios. Well, what this first episode does and what it needs to do is have setup. It needs to get us into this world. It needs to introduce these characters. It needs to start putting the puzzle pieces down on the ground to kind of form the chessboard, as you could say. And so with this first episode, we are kind of, actually, believe it or not, we're thrust into this world of this new film that they're making for this big budget superhero movie. We have the first AD, which is Daniel, who's played by Himesh Patel, who's like typically in essence, the main character. You have Pat, you have Dag, you have Adam, Steph, Anita, you have Peter, and of course, these characters which are there. But Himesh Patel, who's the first AD of this story, is in essence the main character with a bunch of supporting characters that will eventually come up to the main cast in a lot of respects. But this series basically shows how difficult, to be fairly honest, how difficult from the get-go and in the process a movie can be. Sam Mendes, Armando Iannucci, I'm sure John Brown are very familiar with how difficult filmmaking is. Sam Mendes has done some really interesting films with like 1917, of course, Road to Perdition, American Beauty. Once again, I already told you about Armando Iannucci. And so with that said, I was really intrigued just from the trailers of what they could craft, because a lot of these shows can fail. A lot of these movies that are do this kind of thing can fail. Look at The Bubble, which is exactly what this TV show is trying to do a much better job of, because The Bubble is one of the worst things I've ever seen. And so here we are. We're creating this gigantic, I'm sure, $200 million movie. You have the producers breathing down your neck. You have, the creator of the studio, Maxwell Studios, breathing down your neck. You have people that are stressed out, like the director, Eric, who's played by Daniel Brühl, and you have Himesh Patel, who's stressed out because he's having to keep everyone in check. Then you get introduced to this character named Dag, who's played by Lolly Adefope. And then, of course, you have the talent. You have Peter, played amazingly by Richard E. Grant. Everybody's amazing in this episode, by the way. But Richard E. Grant's that old school, he expects a lot of things, and he's very spoiled in a lot of respects. He's a very talented actor. And then you bring in Billy Magnussen, who has always been that kind of blonde-headed guy where he's very, very funny as an actual actor, in real life. And here he's playing like this kind of airheadish, kind of goofy, off the rails type guy who is just doing stupid things that's really making Richard E. Grant's Peter's character mad. And then you have Peter's having to deal with the green screen. He's having to deal with these weird costume characters, and it really starts off very, very well. It actually, once again, it basically goes off and runs with it, and we're right in the middle of production, and then once again, everything starts to fall apart. Once again, you bring in Pat, who is the head of the studio, and he decides that to change something. They're in the middle of this multi-$100 million production. It's very expensive. Everybody's stressed out because it is the way it is in Hollywood. And here comes the creator studios like, no, I'm going to change it and make it something completely different. There's no fish people. So what does that do? It causes everything to go into chaos. It causes a lot of issues. And then you have the main actor's eyes get burned out and they have to deal with that situation. And so the producer of the whole entire series is going to go to bat for Daniel and all that stuff because of how, Pat is treating Daniel and stuff like that. And he gets fired. And that's when, Aya Cash, who plays what seems like the love interest of Daniel, is brought in, and she plays Anita. And she's a producer who's been very, very successful recently. And she's brought in as the main producer. And there, like I said, there's chemistry there, as a lot of Armando and Iannucci's films, and I'm sure with John Brown and stuff like that. But it becomes what is essentially what happens to a production. And once again, this does a really nice job of what happens to a production when it goes into complete chaos, but told in the very comedic aspect tones of what Armando and Iannucci is doing, is for that very over-the-top, silly humor, but also kind of down-to-earth, relatable. You look at the characters from Veep, all the individuals and how they play parts in the roles, and you see it just play out. You see how stressed Daniel Brühl's character starts to get, where he's just trying to take a nap, and he's constantly being bombarded. He's trying to keep everything in check. First AD's trying to keep him in check, and it completely devolves into chaos, and they have to do everything in his power, and that's what the first AD does, to keep everything in line, to keep everything working, keep everything moving forward. And then when you have all these producers coming into the mix, it just becomes a complete chaotic mess. And you see that here. You see just the nature of how ridiculous a big budget movie gets, and how ridiculous the nature of everything has to be put in place. And when everything goes wrong, like, whether it be like a pirate movie like Pirates of the Caribbean, or a Marvel movie or something like that, this is what happens. And I think this does an absolutely fantastic job. I think Sam Mendes, I think the writing of John Brown, I think the humoristic style of Armando and Iannucci, I think it all, as long as it keeps going, this is going to be one of my favorite series of the year, because it absolutely devastates what the bubble tried to do. It absolutely just runs with it. It has fun with it. It also gives the tense nature of everything. And once again, it's only a half hour long, and it became one of my favorite things to watch just straight off the bat. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Sam Mendes anyways. If this is what we're going to get through the 8-episode season, I think it's going to be a huge hit, or at least a hit in the general sense of what's going on with streaming services now. I think Himesh Patel, I think Aya Cash, I think Billy Magnussen, Jessica Hynes, Lolly Adefope, Darren Goldstein, Richard Grant, Daniel Brühl, and so on and so forth. I think this is a well-stacked cast of individuals you may have seen in different forms of factors when it comes to filmmaking and television. And I just think it automatically hits. I think it is a complete winner of an episode, and it's a great pilot for a fun series that I think could really develop into something really wacky. And I hopefully it doesn't go too out there. Hopefully it stays like grounded like this, but also has the humor and is willing to be a little bit like mean-spirited towards the film industry, which is what, once again, Armando and Iannucci did with Veep, where he was really mean-spirited to the nature of politics and how that runs and stuff like that. So for this episode, for what it's trying to do, for 28 minutes, I had to give this like a 9.5 out of 10. I don't think it's completely perfect. I think it could have been a little bit longer for a pilot episode. Give it like 10 more minutes, get into the nuts and bolts. There is like an AD or a PA or something like that, like one of those assistants that's kind of running around just trying to eat lunch and then gets interrupted and stuff like that. So there's some things they need to kind of iron out when it comes to like the character interactions and some of the dialogue. But I think this is a really great start to a series, and I'm really interested to kind of follow along, because once again, I was going to do this series as an episode by episode, but sometimes the series is just not what it lives up to be, and you kind of just don't want to do that anymore. So I'm glad this first episode is great. I can't wait to keep talking about this series, and it'll give me something to talk about for the next 8 weeks. So 9.5 out of 10 for this episode, and I really look forward to the next episode, which comes next week. So with that said, that is going to be my take on the franchise season 1, episode 1, called Tecto Meets the Eye, or Meets an Eye, or something like that. Some of that nature. It's going to be one of those weird titled episodes, seasons type of thing. So anyways, with that said, thank you so much for watching. In the comments below, what did you think of this episode? What did you think of the start of this pilot, this franchise, as it's called, the franchise? Let me know in the comments below what you think. But with that said, thank you so much. So we'll see you guys next week. But if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.